Good afternoon, everybody. I'm David Ross, the chair of the art practice program at the School of Visual Arts, and this is the fourth in our series of Tuesday talks as part of our summer intensive. This year, as many of you know, rather than just invite one artist to speak, we invited one artist to invite one artist to speak with, and that's been working out pretty well. Before I go any further, I'd just like to begin by acknowledging that we are on Lapahoni, ancestral homeland of the Lenape people. We honor their enduring presence, their historical and ongoing stewardship of this land, and their deep connection to this territory. We pay our respect to the Lenape elders, past, present, and emerging, and to all indigenous peoples. We recognize the profound injustices and forced removals that have impacted the Lenape Nation and other indigenous communities, and we commit to fostering a deeper understanding of their history, culture, and contributions. We strive to be good stewards of the land and water and to support indigenous sovereignty and self-determination. Tonight we have with us an old friend. We met in 1993, maybe the end of 92, Pepón Osorio. I met Pepón when he did a landmark installation in the 1993 Whitney Biennial, which was a great work. And he's a professor at Temple University in Philadelphia, where he's been since 2004. He's been involved in numerous exhibitions all over the world. He's an artist who takes his heritage very seriously. He's renowned for his elaborate, large-scale installations that deeply engage the themes of culture, social justice, and community. He was born in San Juan in 1955, and as I said, he's now based in Philadelphia. Pepón has invited as his guest Miguel Luciano. He works across various media, including sculpture, painting, photography, and socially engaged public art projects. He's a piece that I really enjoyed a lot was Mapping Resistance, the piece he did about the young lords in the barrio. That was 5 years ago already.
Yeah.
Time flies. And for the last, and then he's doing the COVID, which at the Met, which is called El Met, which was kind of a cool project. Anyway, I'll let Pepón tell you more about Miguel, and Miguel maybe will tell you more about Pepón. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
So, I accepted the invitation to talk today because obviously it was David Ross, and how could I say no? But I'm not so sure exactly what the intention is behind the talk. I invited when I had the opportunity to invite someone else. I invited Miguel because of the connection with our work, and hopefully you'll see that and be able to make the connection. He's a friend who I admire a lot.
Thank you.
And I'm eager to have this conversation. This is not the first time that we talk. So I also like to talk with someone who I'm very comfortable with. And I just feel that Miguel is the person to be here. So I'm more of a relaxed person. I save the best jokes for the wake, you know. So I'm just going to be myself. And if you have any issue with that, let me know. Yeah. Very little that I can do to change. But but here I am. I think that Miguel and I talked a little bit about the structure of what we wanted to do, and to see the intersection between our work and how that happens. I am mostly interested, and I think that Miguel too, it's interested in practice and in the methodology that we have developed and how we got to that place, because a lot of the people who see my work see this very extremely elaborated, large-scale stuff, but there's a history that led me to that. I always say that the installations that I make are a debris of the process. So I'll talk a little bit about the process, but we also maybe I'm talking too much.
No, you're doing great. You're doing fantastic. And
I'm not controlling this at
no,
all.
no. You're doing great.
So the other thing that we talked about is to ask you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
And so with one word, and so then we can get some sort of weather report of where you are and what you're expecting to hear or that we touch upon. And sometimes I just get up from talks and I'll go like, okay, I didn't hear what I wanted to hear. But I just want to make sure that somehow we cover that. So with one word, welcome. With one word, just tell us what you want to hear.
Let's see the work. Let's see the work.
Okay, the work. Process.
I mean, maybe how you met and that whole relationship and how that's built.
Met, okay. Purpose.
Challenges. Good one.
A lot.
I could just talk
I'm going to do a whole lecture on that one.
Exactly.
Anyone else? Discovered. Discovery. Is everyone satisfied with all those words? Or do you want to add something
Yeah.
else? Okay, good.
Hopes.
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 Like any tips?
Tips.
Tips. Wow. That's
You get like a 1990 tip and a 2007. You're
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
get like my stuff doesn't work anymore.
it's not true. It's not true.
Curiosity.
Curiosity. Thank you.
Great.
Big word in my practice. Struggle. Motivations. Are we good? Is everyone okay with covering those words? You don't want to add more to it? Okay.
Okay, I didn't write. We wrote them down last time, but we didn't.
No,
Before we start, can I just?
We're not faking.
No. It's somewhere in the computer. So, but I just want to say thank you for inviting me. Pepón is a really dear friend of mine, an artist who I admire a lot, and who I was very grateful for as a young artist, looking for work that was speaking in a different kind of language that I felt connected with me, right? And I think a lot of people feel that way when they experience your work in a unique way. And so that made me think a lot about process, about different modes of communication and dialogue, and about different forms of communication that we experience also beyond words and images. And that's something I think about a lot as well, that it's something that, sometimes comes through in process, but discovery and some of these other words, I think, are stuff that happens in the making and in the exploration, I think, of a lot of the work that we're both interested in. And I just say that I also teach at SVA. Come on in.
Come in.
Come on in. Come on in.
Welcome.
Oh
welcome.
my gosh! Wow. Yeah. I'm not getting sure.
You told me to come to that door. I apologize. Hello.
There's a seat there.
We
for
saved you
you.
a seat right here in the front. Gracias. Welcome. So she's our friend. But
I think they can tell.
yeah. So, but I also teach at SVA, teaching the MFA Fine Arts program across the street, and so this is familiar. But I've never been in this theater. I was saying Thursday and I teach together. We teach a thesis course with second-year MFAs, and I don't know. I've been doing teaching and part-time and working in the studio forever, it seems. But yeah, we can just jump in. You want to?
I don't know about jumping in, but
Yeah.
but I think that what's on my mind, I think from one of the words was how I got here, and I think that what I mean by here, welcome. What I mean by, I do this all the time, I don't know why. Here means how did I end up doing the work that I do, and the methodology, the artistic methodology that I've had employed. And I'm curious about you. These things that you see in the back, that image, it's because we thought that it would be good to show you about the process, and then you can see how it ended up being an installation. And for me, was I learned tremendously from my parents, the work ethic, but also my mother was a baker, and she baked lots of sweet quinceañeras cake and wedding cakes for the community, and I learned a lot from that, you know? So that was the experience. And I think that David mentioned about, you know, that I am invested in my culture. And I think that what happens was that at the very, very beginning, I developed a vocabulary as a Puerto Rican, not as an artist, but as a Puerto Rican. I developed a vocabulary myself that it was very ingrained in popular culture. And I come from was debatable in my family. I come from a very, very low income family. My parents said, oh, we're middle class, but you know. And I come from obviously from African descent, and my blood and the way that I think and that conversion of cultures, it's always important in my work, and it is seen by the exuberance and also by the treatment of the surface. You know, I've always wanted it to. I've always saw that we do a lot, we Puerto Ricans, Boricuas, we do a lot with very, very little. And that's an international language, you know? Like we, and I guess I'm talking in general, we seem to create and to add where there's very little. Because the sense of illusion, that illusion is important to us. And it goes hand in hand to deal with the reality that we live all the time. And so in our conversations, we also talked about realities and illusions. I just go into places. It happened during the 1993 biennial that I just created, that I was invited into a word that wasn't mine, and it was all an illusion, and I didn't kid myself. I was like, wow, what's going on in here, you know? And I wasn't discovered, but the word became extremely prominent to the general public, and there was a lot of connections that I remember seeing. But I'm always an outsider. Doesn't matter where you put me, I'm always an outsider, and I always, and obviously you see it now. I'm always gonna go for myself and for who I am, and I'm not gonna kid anyone around. Not that I'm not intellectual, not that I'm not an academic, not that I'm not any of that stuff, but at the end of the day, it's just the most simple things are the ones that matters to me. And that's why I do the work that I do. This is turning into a monologue.
No, it's great. I go back, I mean, to this idea of if the outsider is never on the inside, like then then we don't see it. You know what I mean? And so that's why, I mean, you, Juan Sanchez, I've said this to Pepón many times, but I mean, those were the two kind of examples of Puerto Rican artists that myself as a young Puerto Rican artist who was looking for artists who were Puerto Rican in mainstream art spaces, there were very, very few. I mean, so I'm in grad school 25 years ago, and so no major textbooks, no major publications. It's the beginning of the internet, so it's like we're researching things kind of newly in a new space. It sounds like 25 years ago is not that long ago, but I mean, it's like information has expanded a lot. What's also expanded, not a lot, but a little, is our representation in some of these spaces. But the impact of representation on emerging communities of color, of artists of color, like is not just, I mean, it's obviously hugely important, but like we've seen that, I think, in our community. It's like an ongoing process, but it reminds me still of like this idea that we've made some progress, you know, but not a whole lot. So I say that as a way to kind of like transition into this conversation that we'll get to, where we're both in an exhibition right now together in DC, in a national space, National Museum space, but in the Smithsonian, the National Gallery of Art. These are places that still have very, very few Latino artists sort of like in the permanent collection spaces, right? And so there is a show right now The Shape of Power, Stories of Race in American Sculpture, that is a place where both of our works converge in a national museum space, right? And it's a big exhibition that was recently attacked in Trump's executive order, attacking the Smithsonian. It's the only exhibition, in fact, that was singled out among all the work at the Smithsonian right now. So, but that's a contemporary place of kind of conversion and confrontation of these very kind of histories that we're talking about. And so, but we'll get to a little bit of that maybe.
Welcome. I lost the thread, but I'll get to it.
Yeah.
I think that one of the interesting aspects of our practice and all of those that are on the periphery of I don't think that there's one art world, there's many art worlds, but of the center, mainstream, it's strategy. And I always feel as if our work it's seen through strategies. And even if it's not, I mean, like now the National Museum, there feels that it's about time that they are older artists showing, but it also feels like a strategy to make that happen, you know?
Totally.
And so I often feel that I am creating work, that I'm developing a practice, that it's meaningful to me. And then when it's in the hands of the mainstream, it feels like strategy. It doesn't feel like the work itself. It's value. And I'm saying that because I always feel, actually I was telling Miguel that, believe it or not, and I consider myself an established artist, I can count with one hand the curators that have been to my studio. And I'm saying that because I also feel it's a strategy. I often feel that there is a reason to have my work presented, not because of the in-depth research and study on my work, but rather there is a strategy that leads to have that inclusion. Something to think about, you know? I'm not saying that probably that's how it is. I'm saying that's how it feels to me.
But you mean strategy for the institutions and the curators?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If you want change, these are the artists that can bring change to the equation. And that also feels like an honest and genuine, but at the same time, it's a strategy. You know?
Sure.
Yeah. I have also been extremely curious of, and that's another word that it was of the work that I'm seeing in exhibitions. I'm also curious about how the museum work works. It's every time I'm like, damn, that's not what I thought it was gonna be like. And then something comes up, and I'm like, oh wow. And so I'm always curious about how that world functions. Yeah.
So I'm curious here, like how many people here have never seen Pepón Osorio's work? So anybody that's never seen it before? Okay, all right. So that's why I wanted to know. It's because they have to see the process of your work. Yeah, because it's everything. Pepón is like a very established artist. And the irony, the irony of that is that he's not somebody who has a serial production of new paintings every year that go into the commercial gallery world that give him exposure, you know, and it's not that kind of a process at all.
So that's another strategy that I was talking. I mean, that's not my strategy in terms of I'm not a commercial strategic artist at all.
Right.
When I make work, it's because I'm very much aware that I'm going to have a storage problem at the end.
Yeah.
And I'm not fooling myself. You want to do this?
Yeah. But you tell me how you
So,
want to do it.
so I don't produce, from there, I don't produce work ongoing because a lot of my work, at the end, I end up emotionally, physical, and mentally exhausted. And the last one I made was Convalescence, which is a story about 5 families that I was very curious to work with, including myself, that we were diagnosed with cancer. And it's the relationship that we have to the hospital, health and hospital corporations, and how we treat it as patients in relationship to all that. Very, very complex. At the end, I was in pieces. I just couldn't even talk. And then what happened after that, I keep in touch with families afterwards. And so what happened after that was more complex than the work that it started. But I'll tell you what this is, because I think that there are similarities, and Miguel will talk a little bit about it. This is called Reform. In 2008 or 2011, between 2008 and 2011, 35 schools were closed in Philadelphia. Public schools were closed in Philadelphia due to a budget crisis and just basically what we call the privatization of education in Philadelphia. This is nothing new. New York had it, everyone had it, but I'm just speaking from the place that I know the most, which is Philadelphia. And how I got to this is there was a huge school that had just been closed in Philly and nearby Temple University. And I used to ride a bicycle a lot to work. And I came across this school and I became extremely curious about this huge, you know, sometimes we build big and we fall down big. So this huge school was in the middle of the community, totally obsolete. Nothing was going on. It just the shell of the school at that time. It was closed for many reasons. Asbestos being one of them. And I became really, really curious about this. And so every day I went by and I started to see how the neighborhood reacted to that ghost in the middle of their neighborhood. And I became more and more curious. And then I started to talk to a lot of students who were in the art education at Temple University. And then finally got with one master student who used to teach at the school. And Tom, who I think you'll see it, Tom and I began to meet with families around the neighborhood. And my question was, what happened? I always begin my work, the process, with one question. And I said, what happened? And people were talking about it. And finally, it was obvious that no one knew who the School Reform Commission was. No one knew the reason why it was closed. No one knew what was going to be what was, if any, the future of that school. And then that was it. There was like a big interrogation every time I worked. And so I became more and more curious and more interested. And so at some point, this is a process of 2 years. My process takes forever. And then making the installation takes, like, I don't know, 6 months or something like that. But during this process, I started to meet a lot of people. And people were very curious as to what. I never go into the communities or to neighborhoods and talk to them as if I'm the artist. I'm just like someone else who's curious about this thing.
But who lives in the city too?
Yeah. And knows.
Yeah.
But also very aware that I'm not affected by this. Both of my kids, and I told everybody, I'm very, very straightforward and honest with everyone. Both of my kids went to private school, they graduated from private schools and all that. And so I came up with this idea that I wanted to invite them to a classroom at Tyler and have a dinner. And that's what that image is. And so I invited them all to have a dinner with us, and Tom and I, and then just to talk. My idea was that I realized that also the school closed abruptly, and they didn't have a closure. And so I thought that maybe the dinner was the closure, right? I still don't have an idea that I want to do an installation. I'm going in, this is the right thing to do and the right way to go. And so everyone showed up. Sorry for giving you my back. That's the art teacher who showed up. Mm-hmm. Those are the kids that are not bigger. And then I began to walk around. You see me in the background feeding them and all that stuff. We're talking like, you'll see a lot of them. This is just like one portion. But this is important. This one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one were very, very close friends. And I noticed that in the group. And I'm very sensitive to those things. And I'm started to sort of like go toward that table. And then finally toward the end, I asked them, do you want to hang out with me? And they were like, yeah, sure, I want to hang out with you. So we hang out for about 2 years together after that. And every Saturday they came to Tyler, to the school, and we talked, and we talked, and we talked, and we talked to the point that they just didn't want to hang out anymore. Because like, Pepón, you talk too much. It's like all these conceptual things and ideas that you have in mind. We just want to have a good time. It's like, we will have a good time. Don't worry about it. Can we see the thing? So that's what happened. And that's the science teacher who were instrumental in the work. And Kobe, the guy standing in the middle of it. Can you move? And that's all of them. That's the English teacher. That's the principal. Amazing, amazing kids whose educations were completely taken away from them. This is a primary, really bright kids. I happened to hang out with the ones that you see in the front that I show you, who were the outcast. Somehow there's a connection there. And we took a picture, and then after this, we worked together all the time. We worked together all the time. We went to restaurants, and I think that's the next one that I want to show you. And we hang out in restaurants. That's the group that I was showing you. And we hang out in restaurants, and we became curious about like, who are these people, and who are these kids, and what's going on here? And so all I wanted to do was to bring awareness of the school closing, and then these kids were left without the school, which, by the way, these restaurants were like a block away from the school. People started to make the connection that, these kids have been left behind. And this is what happens. Literally what happens. And so they came up with all these ideas. Oh, somebody wants to come in. They came up with all these ideas, and we started to talk. I said, so what do you want to do? I said, well, the idea that you have of bringing closure, I think we need to open that up. And I'm like, yeah, sure, let's do that. Obviously, I had a budget and a foundation who gave a lot of money for this project. And so we invited the entire neighborhood, the entire community to come and celebrate on May 1st what they call Fun Day. And that's a tradition in the school calendar that every May 1st, they will just come together in the patio. So I went in, and I took over, and I even asked the superintendent, and I said, we're going in. We're going to use your yard. We're just going to go in. And then I went to the police, and I got permissions, and they didn't want to give me the permission, and I just kept fighting and fighting and fighting. And so it happened. So you might want to show the other ones.
These ones here?
Yeah, that's the school district.
A cake?
Huh?
Sorry, a cake?
No, it's a piñata.
Yeah. It's a piñata. It's the school. It's actually a piñata of the school.
Oh, no, of the school district.
Of
the building of the school district, who closed the school.
Okay.
And so I brought it in, and the kids are laughter, and then this is what happened, full of healthy candy, because they were also freaking out about this. I was like, well, we need to eat healthy, and they're like, no, Pepón, we can't eat any more fruits. You show them the next one. They broke it. We gave them hats, and I'm wearing one of them. And then that's it. No, I think that's the same one. There's one where they're stepping on it. Yeah. And then they're stepping on the school district piñata, which is what's here in New York? What is it called? The school district.
You mean like the school
board of education?
The Board of Education
building.
Board, yeah.
The Board of Education
Board
building.
of Ed, yeah.
In Philly, it's the school district.
Okay.
So that happened. We all got together, and they created an entire activity for the full day. We have helicopters from the police like on top of us. It was insane. It was really, really insane. But at the same
it was a lot
time,
of fun though too.
were there.
I was there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was fun. A lot of us went down. It was like a huge party in the schoolyard that was it was a festival, like a festival. Yeah, it was incredible. It was great.
So I'm getting closer at this moment with the idea that I had in mind, and I wanted to share with the students, but I didn't want to throw everything together because what was happening at that time, at this very, very specific moment, is that people starting to believe that I am the prophet who's going to open the school again. And I'm going and convincing everyone, I'm not doing that. The school is full of asbestos. We can't get in. It costs a lot of money, even though 3/4 of the students who were participating, they kept telling me, Pepón, we know how to get in. We can bring you in. It's like, no, we get to the school district. Because I had to make a case. So these are them, the teachers, the kids, some people from the neighborhood who have been to that school, who went to that school, came up. You can keep showing because I think that everyone is getting the point. We had a microphone. They took over. Jesus Christ, I forgot her name. Chelsea and Janice. Chelsea and Janice became the gallery sitters for convalescence, the work that I made recently.
Yeah.
I called them up and really wonderful, wonderful kids. They're not kids anymore. I thought I can, go ahead. And so that's the amount of kids, and more people were coming in by the hour. They were performing. The principal talked in front of the water fountain, and there was this whole issue about the quality of water in the school and lead, that it was filtered through that water. So we used that as an evidence also. And everybody. You can show more.
But the podium is made from a fountain from the school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, thanks for the clarification.
Yeah.
This is the English teacher who also gave a speech. And that's them at some given point. So it was a sense of closure. And then suddenly I just thought, I think that what we need to do is to go in here into the school and pick up all the furniture from the school and create an installation with it. And that's exactly what I did. And so all this, I asked the parents, I went through hell trying to get permission from the school district, finally threatened them with the press, and they finally said, oh, yeah, you can come in and take anything you want. So we went in and got the cubbies, got the chairs, and the school, it was pretty much left alone. And so I got a truck, and then we brought everything in. And you'll see the installation and how that worked. Those are the actual. What I was not aware at this moment, and which I became aware later on, what these were items that had been with these families for the entire lives, right? While they were in school. And they had a connection to every single object that I was showing in the work, in the installation. I somehow, because I was unaffected, I didn't make that connection. And so at the day of the opening, a lot of people sat on the chairs sobbing. Because that's the thing, that's the object that it was left behind. That's the object that they would never come back to it. And so it was extremely, I spent a lot of my openings bringing water and tissue papers to people because we all end up crying all the time. That's the principal that you saw. That's the bobcat. That principal was standing in front of the water fountain.
That's the podium.
And this is the outside as you come in. By the way, so the idea was that I had to convince everyone at Tyler School of Art, and we used one of the art classrooms for installation. So this was an exhibition site. This was a place for gathering the community, but also was a workshops. We did a lot of workshops and meeting. Luis Kapnister, and I'm not sure if you know who Luis Kapnister is.
Kapnister, yeah.
He came, he talked, and a whole bunch of other artists talked about it. And here's the installation. This is the work, completely transformed. The entire classroom. These are real chairs, real people, real desk. What you see on your right is the letter that it was sent to the parents, obviously enlarged. And all the students that I mentioned to you, 12 of them, we did a video based on a poem that Chelsea, the second one, made. And so all of them, and this piece was shown at the New Museum recently. And you can tell. The science teacher came and helped me out. A lot of people came in. You see the handwriting on the walls on the right-hand side in the background? Those are the kids who spend a lot of time writing. So we put the wallpaper on the wall, and then they came every day writing on those walls, which I think that, and then the English teacher did the correction, the same guy that you saw. He did the correction. I was like, you have to be encouraging. You can't fix anything.
But so a question though, the lined notebook paper, wallpaper was blank when you put it up.
Yeah.
And then they wrote the essays.
Yeah.
Before the installation was all
Right.
put, yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then the teacher came in and did the correction.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the background, yeah.
That's the background. It was really unbelievable. You want to move forward?
Yep.
And then, I don't know if you know, but the public school system always knows that there's neurotic teachers that can't stand the sound of the chair. So the students were telling me, we have a lot of neurotic parents. Get the tennis balls, because then there won't be any sound. Like, okay, we do that. That was done by one of the kids also. And Jacob, it's on the very, very top with a really beautiful video that we both work on it together. I never prepared. I never know what's going to happen. I just show and I go with the flow, and then things happen, and so that's how it works. Is this the last one?
No, the ceiling.
Oh, the ceiling? Yeah. So I'm interested in, as I said, in abundance. I'm interested in exaggerating the surface to the point of disbelief and then questioning your surroundings.
I have to say, so I got to see this project, and I've been to Tyler many times, like to visit, with students, done talks, whatever, but I've never been downstairs. So I was completely disoriented, even now, because it did not occur to me that it was actually a classroom for Tyler students. And I've never seen it since then. So my whole reference for the downstairs is Reform.
Ah, okay.
It's like I've never had other associations with that space. So but it's hard to imagine like that this was all, you covered it from ceiling to the floor.
Floor too.
Yeah.
And around. It's pretty big. It's probably a little bigger than this room here.
And there was programming for the entire year, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Every Saturday.
Right.
We had programs of students who came in and began to envision what the school can potentially be, and also a lot of there's some really sad stories here, because I tried really hard as a faculty member to get them into college, but there's no way. Once there's a rupture of this kind in a student life, there is no way you can make up. And so a lot of them, they're academic in this. We have two students who from the community who saw Reform. I take no credit for this, but were admitted. But they couldn't sustain. They couldn't stay. The retention, it's extremely, extremely difficult. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. But yeah, is there more to it?
No, the next one is.
Okay, good.
See. So this is the sort of like where our work converges right now, and this is not either of our works. This is Roberto Lugo, who is another Puerto Rican artist, actually from Philly, right? And he's a ceramic artist, primarily sculptor, And his work is also kind of in the sort of entrance to the exhibition, The Shape of Power. It was a body cast where he paints his body sort of in these different patterns that reflect his own identity. That is both African and Taino, and I think there's some maybe Spanish or Portuguese, references in there too. But it's built in a tradition that is an old tradition in terms of plaster figuration, plaster statues, and the whole exhibition that is really about American sculpture and histories of American sculpture. Shows a lot of that has been in the Smithsonian's collection for eons. I mean, and so it's got. It's an interesting show to research later, especially just because of the political moment that we're in. But it basically takes on the legacies of white supremacy in American sculpture, much of which is evidenced and was supported by the Smithsonian's collection for many, many years. And it really puts that work on view, that history on view, as a way to confront it in conversation with contemporary sculpture by a number of artists that are, it's an incredible group of artists. I don't remember how many works in the show, but there were 3 curators. It took them 8 years to produce it. It's a massive book. And it really was planned well before Trump, was in office. But it was about taking on histories of white supremacy and the role of the institution in sustaining those kinds of ideas, those legacies. So it's a really powerful exhibition, and this is Pepón's work in the show.
That's Las Tuines, and Las Tuines was a similar process that happened. This is like a detail of a much larger installation. The room was also about the same size, the size here. And in the back, you see a video of a guy who I work with a makeup artist, dark-skinned guy, who we had light-skinned makeup on, and then he just splashed water in his face, and then his natural skin tone, it's revealed. It's in slow motion in the background. In the front of it, it's the representation of twins that happens a lot in Latinx communities, and specifically Puerto Rico, where one is a little lighter than the other, and then there's this whole discussion in the family. But I think that I also wanted them to dress up for the museum. And so there's I don't know if you can see it, that there's a lot of information going on around not only their skin, but also hair and treatment of hair and all that. It's a very complicated piece with a lot of contradictions and beauty in the middle of all that, or at least my interpretation of beauty.
And a lot of details that you don't see in this photo from kind of like a zoomed out photo.
Right.
But I think that those details really inform the power of the figures too. Like that, all of the adornments, all of the symbols. It's a very, very layered work when you get up close to it as well.
So one interesting thing, and I know that we're getting close to your works, but one interesting thing is that I also noticed that because of the strategy, again, of the curators and the people who are responsible for acquiring the work, the work is finally finding its way into a museum. Hadn't been for those people, Carmen, Marcela, my work would not have made it to these places. And that's what I mean by, this is 1998. And it was acquired last year. The work that I have at MoMA, 1995. And it was acquired, I don't know when, do you know when it was?
2023.
There you go.
Yeah.
And so there is this gap that also needs, in conversations with David, that I had, this gap that needs a andamiaje. How do you say that word in English? It's a scaffold. to make it happen, right? Without that scaffold in the museum, this doesn't happen. And so there are tremendous dangers now in relationship to the future of the work that people that are taking a chance, and they're literally invisible again.
Sure.
To go even more invisible to the work. So I'm thankful to all these people that probably saw the challenges that the work we're presenting and understanding it from a visceral way, that we're able to bring it in. Had it not been for them, I think that this is different, because the piece that is at the Whitney Museum in the collection was acquired after the biennial. Right after the biennial.
You mean Angel, the
shoe
shoe shiner,
shiner
was acquired after the 93 biennial? Oh, wow.
Right after the 1983 biennial.
So the Whitney is
Yeah, they
doing
were-
better than some of the other places, I mean, in that respect.
Yeah,
yeah.
in many ways.
Yeah,
In
interesting.
many ways. But anyway, I just wanted to bring out that notion that there are artists out there whose work will never be seen because of the structure. Welcome. Because of the structures in which museums are built. And the need to change that. Anyway.
So this
You want me to do you?
No. But this
You're
is
more eloquent than I am.
No, not at all. I just realized, though, this is kind of interesting in this sequence here, because Pepón and I are really dear friends, but we don't get to do this with an audience hardly ever. And so, a couple times we get to do it, but it's a thrill for me. And I realize things and I learn things every time we do this, that I hadn't thought about before. But what's funny about this is that, on the other side of this wall, literally, is where my work is, in the museum, right? And so you see on the right-hand side, there's a Frederick Remington sculpture of this vaquero, this cowboy on a horse. By the way, Remington, who's one of the kind of quintessential American West kind of artists, are considered to be such, was basically sketching Mexican vaqueros and then making sculptures, passing them off as white cowboys. And so what you see as famous white American cowboy culture are all Mexican vaqueros, including this sculpture that's there. And that's not made up. I mean, and that history, that small story, is part of what this exhibition tells. And so it puts that work next to other works that kind of confront the history of Remington. Remington is all over all of the National Museum collections, and he probably is in the White House right now. I would put money
I
that
think he's in shots of the White
that he
House.
has that he is in the White House somewhere, Remington's work.
But there's also a counterpart to it, because Luis Jimenez is in front with the
Yes,
cowboys.
which
Right.
is in vaquero, and that's
Yeah.
the vaquero work exactly. So, and if you don't know that work, Luis Jimenez is a really, really important artist, and his work is that was a huge acquisition by the Smithsonian American Art Museum out front of the museum, and that's a real Mexican vaquero painted on fiberglass with automotive paint from, I want to say, maybe the 80s.
The 80s.
Incredible work, and what a statement about American art, So the Smithsonian is doing some interesting things, and they have been for a number of years. So on the other side of this wall is this work.
There you go.
And I mean, it looks huge on screen, but it's not this huge in real life. It's a platinum-plated plantain. And what I'm realizing is that we both showed this works in Paris in 2008 in that Crayon Factory show.
In Paris.
We were both there. The first ever survey of Caribbean art in Paris, and it was a kind of a big crazy show. But Las Twines were there, and so
That's
were
right,
the
I
Plátanos.
remember. Yeah.
They were across from each other at that point. So this is 2000. I think 2006 actually that I make this series of platinum plated plantains, and it's a kind of conceptual sculpture. It's an actual plantain that's plated in platinum. So inside of this is a real fruit that's been rotting for 20 years now. And so if you X-rayed it, you'd see this kind of shriveling plantain, but there's a very thin layer of platinum on the surface. And so it was a way to commemorate the plátano as a symbol. It's a very layered symbol in Puerto Rican culture specifically that recalls our African heritage, both in terms of African foodways, that's how it's in our diet, but also in terms of identity. And so there are lots of connections to the plátano that also relate to our African heritage, to histories of blackness, things that have been historically stigmatized within Puerto Rican culture that later become really celebrated, especially by younger generations in the diaspora. And so in New York, especially with all the New Yorican friends that I would later, I wouldn't say grew up with, because I didn't actually grow up in New York, but the friends that I know who did grow up in New York, like that was a very proud reference. La mancha de plátano, everything related to the plantain is something that we claim as a proud aspect of our identity. In Puerto Rico too, you could say that, in art history, it's a huge symbol. Anyways, I did a whole series of these platinum plated plátanos in 2006, and the most famous image was called Plátano Pride. And so this is Luis Quiles, who was one of my students. I was teaching in Brooklyn at a place called El Puente when I first moved to New York. And I worked there for a number of years. El Puente is a Latino kind of cultural center, after-school program that was founded by former Young Lords and other activists in the south side of Williamsburg when Williamsburg was a very Puerto Rican neighborhood. And so it still has a very Puerto Rican history. You may not think of Williamsburg that you know today in that way, but that's where my uncles and cousins moved when they moved here in the 60s and 70s. And they lived in Los Sures for many, many years. So I was very proud when I moved to New York to be able to reconnect with the same neighborhood that my Uncle Hector used to live in, and actually connect with some of the people that he was in community with, who helped found places like El Puente. And so I always enjoyed that those traditions of us connecting back to our communities were important. And El Puente is still around, and they have a high school now called the Academy for Peace and Justice. It started in the early 90s. But it was like a place where they were teaching political histories to young Latinx students who were primarily Puerto Rican in the beginning and now are from all over, but still it's predominantly communities of color in Williamsburg that are at El Puente. And so anyway, Luis was one of my students. And so I made these sculptures. I made a wearable version, and I brought it to El Puente and asked Luis, hey, do you want to collaborate in this photograph? And he said, sure. I had a white t-shirt and a necklace, and Luis did the rest. And it was a very spontaneous kind of image, but it became like the most popular image that I had made during that period. And it traveled all over the world, including to Paris. But what I love about that story is he's a Puerto Rican kid from Bushwick who had never been to Puerto Rico in person, right? But felt extremely Puerto Rican, very, very proudly Puerto Rican. And again, the plantain, the plátano as a reference, as a cultural symbol, a very, very proud symbol. And I didn't have to say anything. That was intuitive. And that for me was powerful, so that when his image was all over Paris, it was still a Puerto Rican kid from Bushwick representing the island. And that doesn't happen all the time, where you have a kid from the diaspora representing the island. It doesn't sound like that should be a new thing, but these were new kinds of things to see. So anyways, that's the work that's on view at the Smithsonian right now. Not this one, but rather the kind of platinum plantain on a velvet pillow in the vitrine. It's called Pure Platinum. Where the work, and this is I only shows a couple projects that kind of connect back to community in a way that I think open up this conversation in our work. But this is East Harlem, and this is where I live and work today, and have been I've been about 20-something years in New York. I was in Bushwick, and then now in El Barrio for about 10 years. And I had the honor of working with Iram Maristani for many years, who was the official photographer of the Young Lords and a really, really amazing and important Puerto Rican photographer from East Harlem, one of the most important photographers in New York City's history. And in 2019, we did this project called Mapping Resistance, which was the 50-year anniversary of the Young Lords. We took 10 images of activist moments of the Young Lords, and we put them up at 10 different locations in the neighborhood to reactivate that history in the same space where it took place. And so if you took a photograph on this block, we enlarged it into a billboard-size image as close as we could get to the original location, right? That was the idea. And so if you don't know who the Young Lords were like the Puerto Rican version of the Black Panthers, basically. They were a radical organization for social justice, fighting for the independence of Puerto Rico, fighting for issues of health, food, education, housing, really shaped by the Black Panthers in 1968 in Chicago, and they formed a New York chapter in 1969. The headquarters was in El Barrio in East Harlem, and this is where the project took place, mostly on 111th Street. This is what the Young Lords used to look like. Their newspaper was called Palante, and that was one of their early logos. So these were the kinds of images that we had on the street during that period. And it was a way to not just kind of reactivate these images and those memories while the generation that helped shape this history in our community was still with us. But it was a way to also teach that to a younger generation. And it was a living history, and it still is a living history. I shouldn't say was. I mean, but we lost Hiram a couple of years ago. This is Hiram on the left, and this is Denise Oliver on his right, or on my right. And this is a picture of Denise from 1969 in the original offices of the Young Lords that was on Madison between 111th and 112th. And so she's standing in front of a photograph that was taken inside of an office of a building that no longer exists, that's on a billboard-sized banner on a fence of an empty lot, remembering what was once there, right? And then us telling these stories to younger people today while honoring this generation. And so we invited people like Denise to tell her own story of that history. And so this was a big part of the project, walking tours, oral histories. We did this throughout the year, really, in 2019 through 2020. And I had a grant. I was working with, I got a grant from the Cerna Foundation. Museo del Barrio was a partner, was later in a residency at the Met. There were a bunch of people that got involved in the project, but really it was just Hiram and I on the street doing walking tours, and me really being fortunate to work with Hiram. And he was one of, my most important mentors in El Barrio in terms of someone who taught me about this history, a history that he lived and documented. And so I'm super grateful for that. Most recently, I got to do this big public art project at Metropolitan Hospital that just opened this past year at Metropolitan's on 97th Street between 1st and 2nd Avenue. So it's on the east side of East Harlem. And it's right above the border of East Harlem. So 96th Street is kind of the border, and 97th Street is where the hospital starts. And so that was important for us. I got selected to do this big public art project. I reached out to Hiram and said, we can do something really big on these walls that kind of mark the corner border of East Harlem. Would you like to collaborate on this project? And so we worked together to make this big photo montage of these images from the same history. The project is titled Joy, Love, and Resistance in El Barrio, and it wraps around the hospital on the two avenue sides, First Avenue and Second Avenue. So these are just a few kind of details of what that looks like. It's not all Young Lords history, it's also just kind of like everyday people who were playing in the streets at that time. And this is like another detail of what that looks like. So this history is a really proud history, an activist history that when we first did this project in 2019, it was 50 years reflecting on the civil rights movement, right? And a history that I was just born in 72. So this is kind of like the moment that I'm born in, sort of. But it's my parents' generation. And in Hiram's case, it was his generation coming of age. And he represented kind of like the first New Yorican generation in terms of kids that were born in the city to parents who came from the island, right? And East Harlem is still symbolically like the center of the Puerto Rican community in New York. It may not be the largest community anymore, but it's still symbolically Spanish Harlem, El Barrio, that's where we are. So this is what's on the hospital today. This is an image of the, from 1969, 1970 actually, I think, is when this is taken. It's the takeover of the People's Church. And so that's Felipe Luciano underneath the Young Lords logo. He was the chairman of the Young Lords at that time. The People's Church is a legendary kind of space in East Harlem that is a community church. It's the United First Spanish Methodist Church, I believe. But it was renamed the People's Church when the Young Lords took it over in 1970, 1971. They took it over twice. And they took it over because they really just wanted to use the church for community services, right? To have the clothing drives and the free breakfast programs and the things that they were doing in the neighborhood that they needed a space for. The church wouldn't allow them, or at least the pastor wouldn't allow them at that time. So they decided to take the church and rename it the People's Church. And they said it's only open 1 day a week on Sundays, 6 days a week. It is idle. It's an underused resource. You're supposed to be here administering to those most in need. And so they just took it on. And it's a famous part of Young Lords history. The street here is called Young Lords Way on 111th and Lexington. And anyways, when we were doing this project, a lot of our images were right across from this church and on that same street. And at that time, I also became friends with the then pastor of the church. Now it's a different pastor. And she gifted me this pulpit. And so the pulpit came from the People's Church from 2019, around that time. Yeah.
No, I just keep seeing the connections between the work at Reform.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Exactly. Yeah. That's it's the water fountain pulpit, the podium. Yeah, exactly. So I got this pulpit, and it was just a pulpit. It didn't have speakers in or anything like that, but it was gifted to me. She said, we're throwing out stuff in the basement. I think this goes back to the history of Young Lords. Do you want us? Of course. And so then it sat in my apartment. I had this like church pulpit that was made by a parishioner in the 70s. And it occurred to me that there was this really beautiful opportunity to connect the sounds of that history with the pulpit itself, right? And there was a poet who was a really amazing poet. I think for me, he was the greatest New Yorican poet, named Pedro Pietri. And they called him the Reverend, El Reverendo. And he was famous as the Reverend because he recites this really famous poem, what becomes a famous poem called Puerto Rican Obituary, inside the People's Church during the Young Lords takeover. And it was recorded on film in this documentary called El Pueblo Se Levanta, which was an obscure piece of film footage, but it captures this young poet reciting what some people say is his first live recital of the poem. And I think I have it here, but I don't think this is mic'd up, so you may not be able to hear this, but I'm going to try it.
We'll put this.
Oh, it does. It's going. Great.
They worked. They were always on time. They were never late. They never spoke back when they were insulted. They worked. They never went on strike without permission. They never took days off that were not on the calendar. They worked 10 days a week and were only paid for 5. They worked, they worked, they work and they died. They died broke. They died owing. They died never knowing what the front entrance of the First National City Bank looks like. Juan, Miguel, Milagro, Olga, Manuel, all died yesterday, today, and will die again tomorrow, passing their bill collectors on to the next of kin. All die waiting for the Garden of Eden to open up again under a new management. All die dreaming about America, waking them up in the middle of the night screaming, Mira, mira, your name is on the winning lottery ticket for $100,000. All die hating the grocery stores that sold them make-believe steak and bulletproof rice and beans. All die dreaming, hating, and waiting. Dead Puerto Ricans who never knew they were Puerto Ricans, who never took a coffee break from the 10 Commandments to kill, kill, kill the landlords of their cracked skulls and communicate with their Latin souls. Juan, Miguel, Milagros, Olga, Manuel, from the nervous breakdown streets where the mice live like millionaires and the people do not live at all. They are dead, and will not return from the dead until they stop neglecting the art of their dialogue for broken English lessons to impress the system who keeps them employed as lavaplatos, porters, messenger boys, factory workers, maids, stock clerks, shipping clerks, assistant mailroom assistant to the assistant lavaplatos, and automatic artificial smile endowment for the lowest wages of the ages and rages when you demand a raise because it's against the company policies to promote spics. Here lies Juan, here lies Miguel, here lies Milagros, here lies Olga, here lies Manuel, who died yesterday, today, and will die again tomorrow, always broke, always owing, never knowing that they are beautiful people.
That's Pedro Piedri and Puerto Rican Obituary. Yeah. So this work is right now on view at the Whitney Museum in an exhibition called Shifting Landscapes on the 6th floor. You guys can see it there if you want to see the piece in person. And it's up through, I think, February of next year. Right next to the work are 2 photographs by Hiram Maristani, which is really special. And so one from the Young Lords history, another from East Harlem's history. So I'm super proud of that. That's also something that was not planned. We opened this public art project in December, really dedicated to Hiram. And the Whitney show opened just before that. So while we were doing the Young Lords project in 2019, this is what was happening in Puerto Rico. And it was a huge summer of protests that kept growing and growing and growing on an island that was fed up really with the government's leadership at that time. Ricky Rosselló was the governor of Puerto Rico at the time. This is the governor who was also governor during Hurricane Maria. And he had offended the entire island at this point. There were a series of text messages and chats that got leaked that really belittled the pain and suffering of people after the hurricane. People from his administration that were really making light of people's suffering, a lot of homophobic sort of tweets and things like that and messages. And so people were fed up, and the street lights were still not working and services were horrible. And Promesa, this so-called economic relief bill that really became an austerity plan in Puerto Rico, was leading to hospital closures, massive school closures, public services, and public employees like being let go left and right. And so an unprecedented debt crisis, an island that was bankrupt, and no control over how to actually manage that situation because a U.S. board was now in control of the entire economy of the island, an unelected U.S. fiscal board. That was the result of the Promesa Act. So Promesa happens in 2016. Hurricane Maria happens in 2017. By 2019, people are just fed up and tired. And hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets protesting against all of those things I mentioned. And really protesting against colonialism in general, right? And a bad situation that people were tired of. So the streets were filled. You had in some of the largest protests, maybe up to 700,000 or 800,000 people in the streets. And we're an island of just over 3 million people. So like a massive percentage of the island's population in the streets. We've never seen anything like that here. And it eventually led to the governor resigning. So I'm looking a lot at what's happening in the streets, at small organizations and groups of activists and large groups of families and people that don't consider themselves activists that were taking to the streets. But this was actually a photo from Se Acabaron las Promesas, which is a local activist group. Se acabaron las promesas means the promises are over, and that's a reference to the Promesa Act, which means promise in Spanish. And it was a way of challenging the injustice of that bill. And the black and white Puerto Rican flag emerges during this time as a symbol of anti-colonial protest, as a symbol of protest against this debt crisis and against the Promesa Act, and against the power and authority of this fiscal board over the island. So for me, one of the most devastating issues during that time were school closures. And, hundreds and hundreds of schools had been closed at that point. After Hurricane Maria, hundreds more were closed. At that time, it was maybe a third of the island's schools that had been closed. Right now, it's almost 50% of the public schools on the island have been closed. I think there's maybe 1,400 or 1,500 schools still on the island. And there are many reasons behind that, but mostly it's funding and funding cuts. So this is one of the schools that was never reopened. It was devastated after Hurricane Maria.
But I have to add a little bit to
Yes.
it. That not only is funding cuts, but it's also the introduction of charter schools in the
Yes,
island.
absolutely.
The same as here. Anyway.
And that's also similar to Philly, right? And to
Right.
sort of like the strategy, also similar to what happened in New Orleans after Katrina.
Right.
And so, and Katrina really was like the roadmap for what they were trying to do in Puerto Rico in terms of privatizing the school system. And people were very leery about that. And so it's still a very unresolved issue as we speak. And schools are still being closed. They're still on the chopping block. And people are protesting, trying to protect those schools, trying to reclaim some of these old spaces. A lot of these old schools were being sold off wholesale to U.S. Investors. Never even made available to local Puerto Rican investors or communities at that. And so it's a big, big problem. This is La Goico in Santurce, which is one of the schools that was closed, but the community here fought to hold on to this school, and they were able to organize and form an organization that actually reclaimed the school and made it a community organization. Now it's a community arts organization called La Goico, and we have some friends who are involved in that space today, many musicians and artists. This is like one of the few good stories, but at this time, they're just clearing the space out after it had been closed. My great-grandfather, my grandfather, the abuelos, they all went to school here. And so this is like Loíza in Santurce. It was a place that was very personal to many, many people. But it's, again, one of the few success stories. So this is also kind of like my unlikely kind of like direction to this project that I'm going to show you was that when in 2017, after the hurricane, I was doing a project about plátanos. Not the plantain, like the platinum plantain project, but like a different project about plátanos in a sculpture. And I was trying to visit farms so I could make a mold of some actual stalks of plantains. And there were no plantains available because all the farms had been flattened, completely flattened by Hurricane Maria. So in driving around the island, I ended up seeing instead a lot of abandoned schools, abandoned school buses, and in Corozal, which is a town that's known for its plantain farms, I come across this one bus yard that just had a lot of these abandoned buses. And so I kept going back to that town, and every time I went back, there were more and more buses. And so in 2017, I asked the guy who owned the company, is Pacheco, Transporte Escolar Pacheco, I think is the name of the company. And he said, yeah, we have a lot of buses because a lot of schools have closed. We don't have routes anymore for them, and so they're not worth fixing, et cetera. And I said, could we use some of the material from the bus for a project? He said, sure. We started stripping down the buses. And I didn't know what I was going to do with the material, but I knew I wanted to do something related to school closures. This is 2017, 2018. And then the protests in 2019 happened. And during that time, I decided, okay, we're going to make protest shields out of these, out of the school bus metal. And so we had the buses stripped already. We cut them down into kind of like whatever, like a traditional kind of like protest shield sizes, and backed them with wood, We painted the black and white Puerto Rican flag on the back of them. This is at a studio in Santurce that I rented from a friend. And we made these DIY protest shields in the same spirit of those who were making DIY protest shields already in the protests. And this is what they look like front and back. And so it's called shields, escudos. And when they're all together, you can kind of see the outline or the profile of the bus. It's about as long as an actual school bus. So this was at the Whitney Museum a few years ago in a show called No Existe un Mundo Post-Huracán. There does not exist a post-hurricane world. The first ever survey of contemporary Puerto Rican art at the Whitney Museum in 2023, I think. And that was a big moment for a lot of us. It was a really special time. This is kind of what it looks like from the side.
Were these used?
That's a good question. They were not. They were made to be used, so they were made to be functional. We had some that were a little bit lighter because they're actually kind of heavy. You don't want heavy shields in a protest. But they were strong, and they weren't used, though. So these are made between 2019 and 2020. So by 2020, it's the height of Black Lives Matter in New York and throughout the country. And so that for me was also impressive. The Young Lords Project is on the street mapping resistance. And so we're literally watching like Black Lives Matter protesters march by the images of the Young Lords in East Harlem at certain points, protesters on the island that are still in the streets as well. And so it was a really powerful moment of people rising up and then looking at the legacy of the Young Lords 50 years prior who were doing the same thing in our same streets. And so this is 2023, so it's a little bit later, but this is the moment that these were framed in. This is where they are now. So they were acquired by the National Gallery of Art, and I just installed these like 2 weeks ago in the atrium space of the National Gallery of Art. Thank you. Yeah, thanks. So it's a big deal, and it's I have no idea what's going to happen. Like we're all kind of like we don't know what's going to happen, but they have committed to keeping the work up, and to moving forward with public programs. We have a closing symposium for the Shape of Power, September 4th at the Smithsonian, and the week after, I'm in a conversation with Juan Sanchez at the National Gallery of Art discussing this work and a few other works. So they acquired 2 of my works last year. One of them were the shields, and that are now on view in the atrium. And the other is a painting that I did 20 years ago about another history of protests in Vieques. And so this is 20 years prior. This is from the year 2000. This was when I was in grad school. And it was from an early series of political paintings. I used to paint a lot more. And it's like a 6 by 6 foot painting that were based on these early like vegetable crate labels from the 1940s that had some of the first images of Puerto Ricans in advertising or in print in the US. There was a whole line of Puerto Rican sweet potatoes and yams that were marketed in Louisiana during that period. And in the most racist examples, you had like actual brands called Coon brand Puerto Rican sweet potatoes in like the 1940s. So I was in grad school when I found out about this history. It's a very obscure history that most people don't know about. Not even in Puerto Rico do people know about these histories. It's a visual history that's not well known. I found out about them because my mom was in New Orleans in a tourist shop and found these postcards that were remakes of old crate labels. And she was like, "What are these?" And she sent them to me, and I was in Puerto Rico at the time, and I had never seen them either. And so that led to this whole research on the migration history, on the visual sort of like history and advertising. And this was my way of confronting those racist stereotypes, was I made a series of paintings that kind of turned them inside out. And so Coon brand becomes Coño brand, Puerto Rican sweet potatoes, and it's called Coño. And if you don't speak Spanish, coño is a word that expresses
Everything.
everything. Yeah, depending how you use it. Yes.
Let's not get into detail.
Yeah. And so
Like John,
it's what's that?
like John in Philadelphia.
Well, no, it's more like saying it's a bad word. It's like yeah. It's more like damn or shit or like or it's frustration, anger, discontent, surprise. All of those things depending on the tone of your expression. And so anyways, Vieques, if you don't know, Vieques is an island that's part of the Puerto Rican archipelago that was used as a bombing range by the US Navy for like 60 years. And so this happens at the height of protest in Vieques, where people took to the streets. Until 2019, the largest public demonstrations in Puerto Rico were in this period, in like the late 90s, related to Vieques. And why are they protesting? Because one of the bombs missed the target in 1999, and it killed a civilian named David Sanes. And people broke down the fences to the bombing ranges, occupied the land, used their bodies as human shields to prevent the Navy from bombing the island. And eventually, by 2003, the Navy left. So this is painted at the height of protests in Vieques in the year 2000. The shields are made at the height of protests in Puerto Rico in 2019, 2020. So they're 20 years apart. That's a detail of the painting. The stars are palm trees, which is like the statehood party in Puerto Rico, who was in power at that time and also in power during the 2019 protests. They're a conservative party. In the case of 2019, they tried to align themselves with Trump. Right now, in the case of now, they're trying to align themselves with Trump. It's the same shit all over again. And so the right wing in Puerto Rico exists in the statehood party. It doesn't mean that they're all right wingers necessarily, but that element is in the statehood party. I talk a lot about independence and sovereignty, which is the opposite. And that's like one of the other pieces in the painting, Muerte de Salcedo. And so that used to be the seal of Louisiana in the original painting, but this is a moment in Taino history and Puerto Rican history.
No. Do you know that image is also in the in the early textbooks of Puerto Rican history?
Yeah.
In public schools.
That's where this is from.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's like literally appropriated from like drugstore color textbooks. They're like teaching guides about. It's like one illustrator who did all those illustrations. But La Muerte de Salcedo is based on this story of Diego Salcedo, who was a Spaniard, like a conquistador, who was taken to the river and drowned by a group of Taínos in a test of his mortality. And it was a challenge to this kind of myth that the Taínos thought that the Spaniards were gods, and so they drowned this Spaniard in the river to prove their mortality to the rest of the community. And then there's a rebellion, and so that's the story of Diego Salcedo. It's like this aha moment. It's also a big myth. Like the Taínos, I'm sure, knew that the Spaniards were very ungodly people. But so goes the story. Here, the references to the Navy. You can see like the hat of the sailor kind of floating in the water. But this is where it is today. And so that's on view at the National Gallery in the kind of pop section of American paintings. There's a really beautiful piece by John Quick-to-See Smith to the left. It is not pictured here. And a beautiful painting by Faith Ringgold, The Flag is Burning, in the center of the room. And so the politics of this room is changing in real time. This is only 2 weeks ago. But the rest of the room is like, Andy Warhol, Oldenburg, Jasper Johns, and the usual suspects. There's a William T. Williams on the left in the abstract room. But there's some exciting things happening in Washington also. I don't know how long it stays on the radar, but I'm really grateful to Carmen Ramos, really, for making this work happen. And Carmen, we mentioned her earlier, but I think it's worth saying again, that this is like one person who I met 25 years ago, and I met her through that painting. We met, she saw that painting in a show at the Bronx Museum when I first moved to New York. I was fresh out of grad school in the AIM residency. Wow. And she wrote at me an email. She says she didn't know who I was, but she was moved by the painting, and we built a relationship then. That painting went into a private collection for 17 years, and nobody saw it. And then that collector was deaccessioning his collection, and Carmen found out about it, and so it ends up at the National Gallery all those years later, where she's now chief curator. Back then, she was just a young junior curator of this new thing called Latino art at the Newark Museum 25 years ago. And so, anyways. That's kind of some of the circle of this work and where they meet one another.
I think we're running out of time. I don't even know when this thing ends.
Don't worry about it.
Okay. So
Can
okay, sure, of course.
knowing how the Trump administration is trying to eliminate all of these ideas about American history and kind of literally whitewash it out of the Smithsonian, where Lonnie is in big trouble, and out of the National Gallery, where I imagine Kid Feldman's going to be in big trouble at some point too. How do you as artists stand up to support institutions at this moment? And how do the community stand up to say that you're not going to eliminate us again?
We had this conversation before. I think that this is not new to me, right? Because I have always been, this has been my reality all along. So it's really not new. It's not like suddenly I had all these opportunities and then boom, we don't have them. You know, it's like we never had the opportunities to begin with.
Right.
So I feel very connected to that. I feel grateful to the institutions that have supported me, and I see the importance of others, other institutions that exist and they struggle with it. My take as an artist is that I'm willing to support any institution because I think it's important, not what's happening now, but what could happen in the future, and how things could be in danger, you know, in the years to come. So I never thought that my kids will see your work at the museum. For that matter, my work at the museum. And it is happening. And it's a cycle. You know, it just feels that it's just like a pendulum. And so somehow, somewhere, I feel like I want to support the institutions because I think it's important, because that pendulum will swing back.
But how does the community fight the creeping fascism of the Trump administration?
I mean, that's a great question. It's like I feel very, I think many of us feel very concerned, like obviously concerned about the people that we have been working with in those institutions. Because even before the Trump administration, we're talking about a single person, I mean, most cases, in these big museums that's doing all the work of inclusion for like a huge community of artists. And that by itself is a daunting task. And so Carmen Ramos was originally brought to the Smithsonian American Art Museum, just as an example, as curator of Latino art, and tasked with creating, expanding the collection and eventually producing a major show of Latino art. And she does that in this big show called Our America. We're both in that show. Pepón was already in the collection in the American Art Museum, but one of very, very few Latinos in the collection. So Carmen triples the collection of Latinx artists at that time, has this enormous show. She eventually, she's very celebrated and becomes deputy chief curator at SAM, later becomes chief curator at SAM, but she's also curator of Latinx art at the same time, wearing both hats. And she eventually creates another position for someone else, you know, when she leaves, and she goes to the National Gallery of Art to become chief curator there, where she also hires another.
Major move.
Yeah.
Chief curator of the whole museum.
Yes.
Right.
And she's hired a Latinx art curator at NGA now. And so where she's going, she's doing that. She's one person, right? Tayana Caragol is the Latinx curator at the National Portrait Gallery of the Smithsonian. One person. You know, Marcela Guerrero at the Whitney, right? She's the one that opened the door for us to have that show. So, you know, and now she's the curator of the next biennial.
Right, yeah.
So, you know, these are all people that we love and who deserve like a lot of celebration and support. But none of us take it for granted because you know, and I'm concerned because it's without those folks in those places with expertise in our art, and I say ours in a large sense, just in a community sense, this doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. The expertise is not going to magically appear through another general curator of contemporary art necessarily, because it just hasn't for all these years, you know? And I think yeah.
But I wanted, I'm sorry.
No, I don't have a, yeah.
No, there's a question that I have that I think that follows the question that David Ross is asking, which is, when I looked at the work, history comes first for you. And then what happens after. In my work, I'm looking at post-research, It's like family stories, the importance of understanding and lining up all this political reality. So then later on, they become aware of it, and then it leads to something else. And so history is somewhere in there, but it's more present than past. And what I'm getting to this question, it's also like, I was trying to figure it out how important is for the audience, for lack of a better word, to know what the intention is. Like I am 100% telling everyone at the same time, this is what I'm doing, and for this very specific reason. And if you want to join the group, this is important. For me, it becomes a larger awareness of the political, situation. Like those students who were with me in Reform, when they realized, damn, there is a school Reform, and they researched them, and then they realized, oh, these things are happening to us because there's a much bigger picture than we ever imagined.
Sure.
Right? So what I'm trying to get with this is that I think that our work also evokes and at the same time make all the people aware, make our own people aware. By own, I mean Boricuas and Latinx, but also make all the people aware of the consequences of all this, right? And I think that eventually is important because institutions, and for example, el Museo del Barrio, it's built on and museums that were alternative museums will build on a model that is pretty much like mainstream museums. And it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work that way. And so what I'm saying with all this, I feel like I'm going around in circles. But what I'm saying with this is that we are also creating awareness at the same time that people are participating in the work. Those who are the inner circle, but those who are on the periphery of the project. And I think that that's important in terms of support for institutions. In many ways, because they become aware that, oh, there's a museum. And anyway, I don't know. I probably didn't make my point, but
how important do you guys feel that museums are as a place to focus political activism or just the energy of resistance? Because I'm just thinking of something Ben Davis once said, which is that museums feel like big and scary institutions relative to the individual artist, but relative to the country, they're very, very small and relatively powerless institutions. So, which is not at all to take. I'm just curious, like how you feel about that as an entry point to the broader conversation.
I don't 100% agree with that, but I feel that museums are catching up with the work that we do. And so I'm not that much interested in museums. I'm interested in creating ideas and taking my time to develop the work. I'm also not that much interested in collections, although lately everyone is putting pressure on me about the legacy and this and that and the other. And so for me, it's more about the museums functioned in a way, locally or macro, where in a way that that they're pushing something, and that there's a strategy that they're pushing, and people are somehow responding to it that I think is important in ways that I cannot do. I'm basically working with a very, very limited zip code. And then from then on expanding. And I use the museum, and it's a strategy. I use the museum as a way of presenting the work after it's shown in communities as a way of really opening it up, and all the people are able to see it. So for me, museums are important. I don't know, I think that people are aware that the Smithsonian is a big, big institution and has a big reputation around. I think that the Metropolitan Museums are it's also like key places to go. If you are a person who's interested in intellectual world, those are the places to go. And so for me, I don't see them so much like a birthmark in the nation. It's not like a little birth. I see them as something that is much bigger than that, or at least I wanted to hope that that's what the case is. If I want hundreds and hundreds of people to look at my work, the museum is the place. Because I can't do it not that I want to, but because of the frustration of those institutions, I'd rather just work like this and then open up. Yeah. And that I had a show at the new museum recently, and it was huge, beyond anything that I could possibly imagine. It wasn't a retrospective. It was a lot of work that was put together. And then I realized, wow, these are venues in the way that I'm not used to. But I see them as something that they can take the thing to a much larger place than I can.
I just want to say that it's I want to highlight something that Pepón said that I think is really important with your work, and that is that the museums are where the work can expand later, but where it begins and is much more important, I think. And it's original context, it's original audience, it's original community, and that's one of the things that. And having visited several projects, there's no way I can describe that in words. That to see the work in the space of community where it's originally kind of conceived and made for a particular audience, there's no replacing. You cannot recreate that.
In the museum,
but
no.
I watch people weep in front of your work repeatedly at the new museum.
Yeah.
And so the power of the work to still very intimately connect with audiences, even in a place that feels as cold and kind of sterile as a museum, says a lot about the work. And I think that's where your work is singular and unique and different from everybody else's. And I love that about your work so much. And I think that with most of the work that I showed is not kind of like the process-oriented, community-based work. These are works that were meant for these spaces. Like the shields were meant for, they could have been activated in the streets, but they were meant for an exhibition space like this, and ideally a museum space. And so for me, with this work that is about history, the museums play a role in completing my goal for that work, which is for the history to be taught, to be known, to be broadcast, and to challenge these other kinds of histories within those same structures, within those same walls. And some of that's very intentional with these works. Like right now I have 5 or 6 works on view in DC in 5 different exhibitions in 3 national museums at the same time, none of which was coordinated. And so that's a weird thing, and it's all about Puerto Rico. And so I only showed a couple of them, but and most of them are long-term works that will be on view for a while. And so I'm looking what does this mean to have all this work kind of on view in these spaces? And I go back to those people that opened up those doors, because they did that work years ago for this to happen right now. And so now what do we do with that? Well, there's maybe an opportunity to activate conversations and to engage audiences and use it as an educational opportunity. And for me, that's another kind of role that the work has potentially when it's in a museum space. And
I wanted to say this because it's just I cannot leave this conversation without talking about it. But my generation comes from a place of one Hispanic month exhibition and one little tiny thing hung, right, on the wall. And a whole bunch of artists that were like me would probably had an opportunity during that month to exhibit. African Americans had the same issue, Black History Month, And then that was it. So I am so excited to see that this kind of work is in a museum now, which is a huge commitment by the museum, by the curators, by the administration and the institution. This size. In my generation, I would have never seen anything like this, which brought me to the idea at the retrospective of the Museo del Barrio, but the Whitney Biennial was the first piece that I just said, I'm not doing anything small. You guys want me? Give me and it was huge. It was huge, and ended up at another museum. But then the process, I wanted to bring it in as well. It's not only that, but I don't know if you remember this, but I invited the detectives who did there, and all of us standing in front, and they were doing the work, and they put the final signature to it. And it's important because that's the world, that's the museum that I can envision. That doesn't exist. Museums are getting closer to it, but I see how it's getting bigger and becoming a little bit more seen in the general public.
Is there a sense that it's under threat right now?
It is absolutely under threat, but I go back again to the idea that it's a pendulum,
Sean, you had your hand up?
Actually, my question was
Whoops,
answered.
sorry.
I was curious for some context on your statement about your work. Once it gets into the museum, it's through kind of a strategic process, but you actually answered the question, so I wanted a little context on that.
Oh, okay. I don't know what I said.
Well, I was just interested to know, did it lose meaning for you? But I think the excitement that you expressed it sounds like it just takes on new meaning in some way.
So this is what I'm seeing happening, and I just go back again to your question. It gains a different meaning. It can't be the same meaning. So when you were talking about the work, and I remember visiting many times that exhibition, people were sobbing in front of the scene of a crime, which is one piece done in 1993. In 1993, people were really pissed at that. And so the evolution of the visitors and the evolution of spectators have made museums greater. People come in with a sense of curiosity, with a greater empathy than they did many years ago. And so that's what I just someone was talking about hope. That's where my hope is, that eventually museums will have generations will have that great sense of empathy that allowed the show, The Shape of Power, take place, Yeah. But anyway, yes?
I just wanted to acknowledge the love and relationality in your process. I feel like that wasn't something that was explicitly named, but the fact that you took so much time to get to really see the people that you were with, to me was so touching. Yeah, so just wanted to
Thank you.
shout that out and say thank you so much.
Man,
Thank you.
That is so Pepón. That is so it is.
Also, I have to apologize. There's a group of us who are in the residency who have to leave now. So we're going to go.
Oh, okay. I was wondering.
We can wrap it up now if you like.
Yeah. Are you okay? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.